This is Scott Richmond.
And Arnie Sherman.
You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. Arnie, happy Sunday morning.
Happy Sunday morning to you, Scott. This is the sort of peak of the great vortex of sports.
Yes.
This weekend. We have every professional sport going on. Every major professional sport going on now.
Yeah.
We have baseball, World Series going on. We have professional football. We have college football. We have college basketball almost ready to start. And we have the NBA. And, you know, you can't turn on a TV without some professional or college sporting event.
This is the apex. This is the top of the ladder.
Well, I call it the vortex because you get sucked in and you never get out.
You are right. It is but I know this gentleman, this guy, folks. He loves his sports. He loves his den to watch his direct TV. He's got every package.
I have my Sunday NFL package, and I even have the
NBA.
No. I have the NFL channel where they just show the when you're in the red zone,
right? The red zone,
so you can watch every team getting ready to either score or not score.
But you love sports.
Yeah, well, I do, and I have my own teams as you do, and most of them are New York based,
and they disappoint.
And it's hard to manage all this, and the reason I'm brought that up. It's not just because it's happening. It's because our guest on today's show, Kent Haslam, who is the University of Montana athletic director, he has to oversee 15 NCAA sports, and I believe there are 18 club sports that are also at the university. Things like the rodeo team. We have a great rodeo team that's not NCAA official sport.
Right.
So we have what do you call it? Lacrosse. We have rugby. We have many other club sports, baseball.
Yep.
That are handled. So if you combine the two, he's got over 30 sports that he has to pay attention to, and I don't know how an athletic director does that.
He's very busy.
He has a family, he has a wife and children, and he has to manage the entire athletic department. And of course, at this particular time of year, there's an inordinate focus on one particular sport, which is football, and the new Bobby Houck era, which is at this point Bobby's 4. Well, I don't know what's going to happen Saturday. This is going to air the day after our game on Saturday,
right?
But he's 4-3. I'm assuming he's going to be 5-3 at the end of the weekend. But there's already some grumblings about that, and I'm going to ask Kent what his expectations are for bringing Bobby back in football, and where does he think we're heading in a very competitive world.
And I think I'd like to also, let's talk about the business of sports, right? Because we love business and we love sports.
Well, it's a huge business, and most colleges and universities do not make money on their sports program. Very few do, in fact. And it's not only a business, but then there's also the issues of injuries. There are many, many parents who are less inclined now to have their children play sports like football, and if their children are sports inclined, they may be moving them to soccer or golf or other kinds of sports where you don't have the damage that can occur from football.
So talk about sports development and how do you keep people interested in participating and playing.
Right.
That's a great point, actually.
Well, even when I was in school, my parents would not sign to allow me to play football when I was in high school.
There's a million reasons for that.
But I ended up playing lacrosse. I had no idea what it was. They didn't realize it was probably as violent as football was, but they didn't know what it was. I told them it was some Indian game, and they signed to allow me to play lacrosse, but they wouldn't let me play football.
So isn't that interesting? So we'll have a lot to talk about with Kent Haslam. He's our guest on What Do You Know? Back after this. All righty, we are back.
Kent, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
So you've been athletic director at University of Montana for 6 years. And for our listeners, what does the athletic director do?
Well, sometimes I feel like I'm still trying to figure that out.
Well, you've had 6 years to figure it out, so you probably have some angle on this.
Yeah, no, it's a complex job that involves a mix of hiring coaches and working with student athletes and raising money. But the general explanation is it's my job to oversee our 15-sport NCAA Division I athletic program, which encompasses everything from competition and athletics and academics, hiring of coaches and staff, putting on events, those type of things. But really, it's the overall supervision of our Division I athletic program.
It would be hard for anybody to give equal attention to 15 sports, right? I mean, it's, yeah. And some sports dominate the landscape more than others, like basketball and football.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you have to certainly focus on those sports that generate the revenue. And I think everyone would recognize the fact that football, in particular, and very unusual for our level, to generate the revenue that it generates, nearly $5 million a year in ticket sales alone. That's just unheard of at this level.
Most people would realize that most programs don't make money around the country at most colleges.
Oh yeah, no. In fact, most do not make money because you're getting some kind of subsidy from the university. But I remember when I was working at NAU down in Flagstaff. My goodness, we'd be thrilled if we generated $500,000 off of every ticket we'd ever sold during that fiscal year. And here we are, more than 10 times that just in football. So it's a process. It's a balance between running a business, but still making sure that we're focused on the overall mission, academic mission of the University of Montana.
But one of the things that's different about this business in an academic environment is that there are a lot of outsiders that pay a lot of attention to what's going on.
There are. Yeah, we have 25,000 people that show up to football games, and they've all got opinions on everything from the music that's played to the halftime performances to what plays are called to how much the hot dogs cost. And so you do have a lot of outside pressure and a lot of things that draw to your time. But at the core, really, we are in the business of education. We really are. We simply use athletics as that vehicle to provide the education and also give young people the opportunity to continue their education. Many first-generation students and many who may not have gone to college had athletics not been the vehicle that got them there.
Well, as you know, I mean, if you look at a college football, I mean, the reality is that in any given year there's a draft, and there's only 200 or 300 players out of the thousands and thousands that play Division I and Division II sports that ever go on to the next level.
Oh yeah,
they're really students.
They are,
more than athletes.
And there's a catchy phrase that the NCAA uses that says that 98% of our student athletes will go pro in something other than sports.
Yeah,
right.
And that's what a lot of those student athletes will come in thinking their next step's the NBA or the NFL, and that's okay.
But we've had our share.
We've had our
almost
share.
a disproportionate share for a while.
Absolutely, but then there's eventually a time when reality sets in, and we're told that we're no longer good enough to play the sport. Some it comes at 40, and some it comes at 22.
Right.
So the bulk of it come though for our student athletes there when their eligibility is expired.
So with a lot of the changes that have happened at the university, with Seth coming on as new president, are you involved in like conversations around recruitment and enrollment and marketing of the university? I mean, do you have a seat at the table? Because I would imagine you would, because you're such an important part of it.
I do, actually. So I sit on the president's cabinet and get to interact with those folks that are running the overall university, and the provost and the VP of enrollment and strategic communications and legal counsel and all those others who sit around the table once a week in the president's cabinet meetings. And I report directly to the president. So I want to do all that I can as an athletic director to push the mission of the University of Montana forward. It's certainly another very much a cliche in the college athletics business to say that that athletics really is the front porch to the university. It's not the most important part of the home, but it's the most visible.
Right.
And that allows an entrance into the university for many people who would never have connected to the University of Montana.
Sure.
Well, also as students who are looking to go on to college, I even remember when I did, back in the last century sometime, I looked to see what kind of football program and basketball program. I went to the University of Cincinnati. At that time, we didn't have much of a football program, but we had a heck of a basketball program.
Yeah.
And, you want to have some school pride. You don't want to go I mean, to some extent, you don't want to go to a school where a basketball team is 1-23 every year. I mean, that's kind of a downer. If you feel that athletics is a part of, the student life experience, that's important. I mean, at Ohio State or Michigan, or going to a game, University of Miami or some of the big schools, that's an important part of the campus life.
It is
and matriculation into adulthood.
Yeah, it is important, and you have to make sure that you don't let it dominate what you're doing or take over what's more important on a campus. I tell people what we do in athletics is an extremely important part of the university. It's not the most important part, but it's an important part, and it's an important part because it opens the doors for so many young people, but also opens so many doors back into the community and really back into the world of connections back to good old University of Montana.
And you mentioned football generates $5 million, and I know when I spent 17 years on campus, and I know there were times when other departments at the school were jealous of what the football program did. I'm in biology or I'm in chemistry. We don't have a team we can put out there and raise $5 million. We can do some research, maybe do it, but
it's not as sexy as a football team winning.
Right? No, and it doesn't make the community feel as good. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
We have a very high standard in this town. When I went to college at UC, we only had one winning season, and we were 6-5.
Right.
I mean, here, if you go 7-3, it's like a losing season.
Believe me, I feel that.
Yeah,
I know that, and we recently made a coaching change that everybody knows about in football, and brought Coach Houck back. But our previous head football coach went 21-14, and that just wasn't quite good.
That'd be good in a lot of schools.
Isn't that incredible?
I would say more than half the schools in the country haven't had a coach in the last 10 years that's gone 21-14.
Interesting. Let's listen to who your constituents are. You have the university constituents, the president and the other cabinet members, and you have the fans, you have the coaches, the players. You're like the ultimate diplomat. I mean, you really have to be. What prepared you for that? I mean,
well, I think first I came from parents, in particular a father. He's an educator, still alive. My mom's still alive, and they were very good people. They enjoyed being around people. My dad was a vice principal at the high school that I went to, and so I watched how he interacted and he balanced and managed and made everybody feel like they were the most important person in the world. And so I watched that, and then I was an athlete, played football and basketball and baseball all through high school, played some baseball in college, and so watched coaches and watched how they interacted, good things, bad things. And then you work for people throughout your life, and you watch people who do it well, and you watch people who don't do it very well. Sure. And you learn on both sides. And so and I get a lot of people who will ask me, what's my best way to get in? I'd love to be a college athletic director. And at times I say, boy, there's got to be a better business for you than that. But they say, what's the best way to do it? And I say, you've got to get your foot in the door, but then you've got to really be able to communicate well, and you've got to be able to balance everyone's demands and really genuinely enjoy being around people.
Right, sure. And how do you prioritize? I mean, like you must have to look at a priority list every day and make choices that it's not going to make everyone happy.
Yeah, I think what you do, what helps me to prioritize is surrounding myself with really good staff that are focused specifically on certain areas. Have someone who's focused on academics and compliance, someone who's focused on operations, someone who's focused in on fundraising and development, and they tap me and they're like, hey, you've neglected us a little while. You need to focus in on this. And
sure.
It kind of helps me get my bearings.
Well, it's impossible. You're married. You have 5 kids.
I do. 2 of them at home, so that they're slowly leaving the home.
But you can't give equal attention to 15 sports. You can't go to every event at all 15 sports. There's not enough time in the day.
Yeah, but you try and be visible at everything. And one of my favorite things to do is to swing by practices. It's great. It's when you really see how coaches interact with student athletes, and when you really see the dynamics of a team. And that really is what rejuvenates me. I walk down to basketball practice or poke my head in volleyball practice, and I go, oh yeah, That's why I love this job.
Sure, of course.
It's watching those student athletes.
And you must get some great sense of satisfaction in, for example, bringing Travis DeClure in to run the men's basketball program. And now we're, preseason #1 in the Big Sky. We had winning seasons, last few years. And it doesn't get the notoriety that football gets on this campus, but it's moving in that direction. Yeah, it's exciting to watch the men's basketball team.
Oh, it's great. And we have such a great history here. We have such a great brand at the University of Montana. I remind people there's only a limited number of a university of a state.
Right.
I mean, we're not directional. We're not. We are the University of Montana,
right.
And so we are the flagship of the state. And I know, and Montana State would say the same thing on their side. They're the land grant, but. It does give you good satisfaction watching.
Let's do a quick ID. Sure. Real quick, we have Kent Haslam. He's our guest. He's the athletic director of the University of Montana.
And I point out the men's program, not to diminish the women's program. The women's program has always outdrawn the men's program historically. And you have Robin Selvig, who I think he retired as the 6th winningest coach in football history in women's
basketball.
Women's basketball.
Right.
He might have been winning football coaching, put him on the field. But the men's program has always lagged behind, and now it seems like it's moving up to at least
which is great,
and maybe better standing than the women's basketball program.
What's it like when a coach or somebody who does recruitment says, I want you to meet this player or see this person at practice, and you just see somebody where you see their athleticism and their talents are that much better than everybody else's? What do you feel? What's that like? Well,
and I don't get involved in the recruiting process. I typically meet when they come on their official visits. A lot of times I like to meet with the parents and the potential student athlete, but I often will run into Grizz fans in Billings, or I'll be traveling and switching planes somewhere in Salt Lake or Denver, and I'll get that question, are you out recruiting? And I'm like, no, I don't recruit. I remind folks, I'm not the general manager or president of player operations for the University of Montana. So the coaches recruit. I enjoy the meeting of the student athletes and their parents when they come on their visits.
Sure.
And then it's a lot of fun to once they get here on campus.
Right.
That is by far.
What's that like?
That by far is my favorite part of the job, is watching a student athlete come in as an 18-year-old freshman, thinking at times that they own the world because they're very big fish, small pond coming in now, and then watching them adjust to being away from mom and dad, being in a city. For some, this is the biggest city they've ever been in.
Yeah, right.
For some, this is Podunk, USA. And so watching that them adapt to those things and grow and learn is really, I think, the key to this job, and I really enjoy that part of the job.
Good.
And then watching somebody like Trueman Johnson sign a contract for 5 years for $75 million with the New York Jets.
Yeah, that's not a bad reward for the time he put in here. But it's for every one of those, you're going to have 100 that are going to go be teachers. They're going to be doctors. They're going to be lawyers. They're going to go into the media or do other things with their lives, real estate development, and watching them grow and then come back and recognize how valuable that experience was here is satisfying.
We also have 18 club sports at the University of Montana. Do you play any role in the oversight of that activity?
I do not. That all falls under campus recreation and associated students at the University of Montana. I get that question quite a bit.
Right, because we have a rodeo team, and we have a lacrosse team, and
we do, and I do not supervise or have any supervisory role in those club sports.
Are any of those sports able to cross over to become NCAA sports?
Boy, Scott, I get that question all the time.
Right.
When are we going to add wrestling? When are we going to add baseball? And I am always very candid with people and say, most likely we will not.
Sure.
And I would never say never, but there's so much, and this could be a 2-hour show, in just talking about Title IX, the finances of a university's athletic program, the competition and the conference that you can join. We added women's softball a few years back, which was a huge hit, no pun intended. But I don't see us adding any other sports, in particular male sports, just because
of Title IX.
Just because of Title IX. And keeping
Well, we do. Yeah, I mean, it would be logical. We have a women's golf team. We don't have a men's golf team.
Yeah.
And we have softball. We don't have a men's baseball.
Yeah. Yeah.
To try to even things out.
Yeah. Football is
or
just,
soccer.
Sure, it takes so much.
Men's soccer and football is just the big one. There's 105 male athletes on that team, and then you try and balance that out with other opportunities for females.
Sure.
Do you have time, since you're so busy doing what you do, but you're from Salt Lake, do you have time to enjoy professional sports? Like, do you have a team?
I spent a good portion of my career. I've been really fortunate to have a really cool experiences in my career and spent time in professional baseball, worked in professional baseball. And I think at that time, when you work a professional sport, you kind of see how the sausage is made,
right? And
so you kind of
which team?
I was with the AAA team in Salt Lake with the Twins, and then spent time with the Angels in Anaheim right after Disney had purchased them. And so, growing up in Utah, we were kind of we would become fans of the teams we saw. So the Broncos were on all the time, and the 49ers were on all the time. So I kind of started to like them. In baseball, honestly, I really like any team that's out west.
Sure.
Just because I'm a Western kid.
Right. So the Mariners.
Were you a Jazz fan?
I was a Jazz fan. I was living in Salt Lake in the peak years of Karl Malone and John Stockton. And
that was good basketball. You had a good chance you're going to go and
watch.
We're
suffering Knicks fans.
Yes. Yeah. It was good basketball, and it was fun to watch. And so, yeah, I would. I tend to watch the Jazz, but I'll be honest. I can sit and watch any college football game, any college basketball or baseball game. I could sit and enjoy any one of those. There's times I have a hard time connecting and relating now to the pro side of it. Maybe that's because
except University of Nebraska for the first 7 games.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, look at that storied program, and it happens to everybody sooner or later.
Right.
You went 0-7 before they won their first game.
Yeah. So it's tough. I remind folks, athletics is unique. There is a winner and a loser every time we compete, and so you're not going to have everyone being successful. But that's just one measurement.
Right. And any given day, there's a team can be upset.
Yes.
So I do have to ask you this. We're going to be airing this Sunday. The Grizz will have played Saturday at UC Davis, so we'll have 9 games into the year.
Yeah,
but
we'll be 8. We'll be 8 into the year.
We'll be 8 into the year, and we're 4-3 now
Yep.
going into that game. What's your assessment of the transition back to Bobby from where we've been before? I mean, how do you assess that? I know you get to ask that all the time.
I do.
What's your take?
I'll tell you, Bobby Houck has been a tremendous addition to our athletic program. I knew Bobby when he was here before, worked with him, and then he left, and now I've had the opportunity to hire him back.
And that's a very rare occurrence.
It is rare, but it takes somebody unique to really understand what it's like to sit in that chair. It's whenever we have a coaching position open, we do not lack candidates because of the brand that we have. But I'll tell you, he has been such a great ambassador for this university and this football program, and we're in good hands with Bobby Houck. We're in good hands.
I'm always impressed when a coach is in shape. I watch a lot of college teams, right? And the guy can hardly waddle out on the field like me. But Bobby looks like he just came out of the weight room every time he's on the field.
He leads from the front.
He leads from the front. That's a great way of putting it.
Are you, this question I'm going to ask, and it's controversial, but do you think that players should be paid? Like that whole conversation around, should we be paying these players who,
you're making $5 million at the university, right? And you got players that are, getting scholarships.
Right. Scholarships.
What's your position on that?
I mean, I don't think you're going to be surprised to hear an athletic director say, I don't think we should pay them. I feel like we do pay them. I feel like we pay them in a scholarship. And I really like the level that we're at here at the University of Montana. While we do make $5 million in ticket sales, it costs us more than that to run the football program.
Sure.
But I do think that there are reforms out there that could allow for student athletes, for example, to capitalize on their image and their name and their likeness, where they could generate some revenue that way. I think some reform could be done with agents and contact with agents and
right.
agents paying. What would it hurt if we have an agent who wants to come in here and sign one of our football players and say, look, I'm going to give you $100,000, but I want you to be with me when you leave. And if that player fails, then shame on the agent. You lost the money.
Right.
But I don't see why there'd be any reason for that. But flat out just writing them checks, turning them into employees, I think opens so many other things and changes so much what we hold dear in college athletics that we might as well just open a minor league program, and I just don't think it fits what the collegiate model is.
Sure. Yeah, it is tough because for every 100 students that are normal, you get Alonzo Ball and his dad, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And there's something going on there that's out of the ordinary. Mm-hmm. Or you get a guy who's there are many players now because of training and who are freshman year or sophomore year are ready to be professional.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see them. It's almost impossible now for a skilled quarterback make it 4 years.
Yeah.
Because there's so much pressure on them to do something. And maybe that would help if they had an agent, and maybe they'd stay longer.
Yeah.
Finish out their academic careers.
Well, and that question is top of mind right now, certainly with the Alston case that's going on in Northern California, the case that is in front, he's essentially suing the NCAA saying you've artificially capped what we can be compensated.
Right.
And then just the FBI trial and the men's basketball trial that just ended in New York. And so there's a lot of focus.
Well, and there's some permutations like, Rick Pitino or others getting money from the athletic companies like Adidas and others, and they're making money because they've become a personality, and they're only become a personality because their players are doing so well. I mean, it is not a simple.
It's complicated.
Issue. It's yeah.
Do your peers? You obviously do you interface with your peers a lot, like ADs at other schools?
Yeah.
You're on the selection committee too, right?
Yeah, and I just barely got back from our Big Sky Conference administrator meetings. We have them every fall in Salt Lake, so. We get together, and then I interact nationally with a lot of our peers. I think those of us that are at the FCS level, as we watch some of this transpire, let's face it, at the large school level, and I always hate to pick on Alabama, but the Alabamas and the Ohio States and some of those schools, I think there's a certain amount of gratitude that you're where you're at.
Sure.
You just you don't have to worry about trying to keep a football coach by paying him $10 million, because
that's shocking.
That's shocking to me.
Compared to what our coaches make.
Yeah, I mean that he certainly Nick Saban is worth all the money he can make. I'm never going to tell someone you don't go make as much as you can make, and but you do look at that and you think, where does it end? How high does it go? And that's what opens those doors for those conversations.
Well, when programs like Alabama ended up happening in professional sports, like the Yankees buying everybody, they had to institute new rules to control it, on salary caps and luxury taxes and all that. Yeah. I mean, I think Alabama could beat, the Giants probably. I mean, it's a machine.
I agree with you. Another interesting topic with everything that happened with Paterno and that whole program at Penn State.
Yeah.
And the wrestling coach up in, I forget where it was, Larry Nassar.
Oh, at Michigan State.
Michigan State. Tell me how that has actually impacted you from a day-to-day perspective.
Well, it certainly is something that those type of incidences are on your mind all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it refocuses you back to what's most important. And there are times when you mix money and pressure and competition and a little ego, and you mix that, it becomes a funky milkshake. And you've got to make sure you're grounded in those things that matter most. But you watch those things, and it gives you a moment to reflect back and say, okay, do we have the processes in place to have someone feel comfortable to report that? Are we following through on those reports? Do we have the right people? Good. Bad people are going to be everywhere, and bad people are going to do bad things.
Yeah.
I think what you want to make sure you do is that you communicate effectively, and you establish a culture from the get-go. But those things are scary. They are very scary.
I think they're scary for anyone who runs a business. They're scary because I think, whether it's an AD or a GM or a head of a firm, it's just.
But it's much scarier when you're dealing with
it exists
minors.
Yeah.
Many of them who have left home. Right. They're no longer have any parental supervision, and the university does have some responsibility in providing an environment that allows them to feel safe and secure.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
Well, you or their coach are a parental figure to them. In many instances, they come from...
bleeds over to other areas. I mean, in some cases...
Academics.
Larry Nassar, they talked about him being his problems with athletes, but I wonder at the university whether he saw other regular students in part of his practice.
Right.
Did he work at the student health center? Were other students abused? I know the athletic piece of it got such a big piece of attention because of the Olympics.
Yeah.
But you got to be concerned that the same thing that's going to happen to a student athlete is going to happen to somebody else.
Well, that's a great question, though. Like, so is the vetting process for coaches and assistants? Is that really is that something that you review all the time? Process? He's like, how do we know the personality test wise that this person doesn't have a schism of some sort that we're not aware of? Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting when you start to think about it.
You do all you can. I mean, we certainly do background checks, and you talk to a lot of people. There's good and bad nowadays with our immediate information and our accessibility to information.
Yes.
And social media and all those things. It's really hard, I think, to hide a lot of things now. But those are your biggest concerns is surrounding yourself with really good people. It's interesting. We talk so much in athletics about sexual assault. We talk a lot about the use of alcohol. We talk a lot about social justice and awareness and understanding our role that we play. And we talk a lot about, while sexual assault and other things you've referenced don't reside exclusively on a campus within athletics. We know that. There's no segment of society that we can point to and say that's where all the problems reside. However, in athletics, we have such a great platform from which to change the narrative and to lead, that we have to be able to take that seriously and say, look, when you come here to the University of Montana, it is similar to playing for the New York Yankees. There's real great things, but there's going to be some downside too, where you're constantly going to be scrutinized.
Well, you're constantly visible.
You are.
You go downtown and you walk into stocks, and everybody knows who you are.
Exactly. So if you can't,
that has its pros and its cons.
Has its pros and its cons.
Let me ask you about something. Let me switch topics a little bit. Particularly related to football, but it does affect other sports. Student athletes being injured, concussions, trying to change the rules to protect them and try to change the equipment, yet it doesn't seem to, and maybe statistically it has had some effect, but I watch college football on the weekend. There's always somebody injured in the game. Mm-hmm. There's always, if you watch a full slate of NFL games, there's usually a card on the field in one of the games, during a Sunday. Is the sport too violent? I mean, have the athletes become so superhuman compared to what they used to be that it's almost impossible to eliminate that?
Well, there's no doubt that sports are physical by nature, and they require a certain amount of physical activity. Football, for instance, it is a physical sport.
But it kind of changed. I remember, to me personally, and maybe different to you, but personally it changed when I saw Lawrence Taylor playing in college.
Yeah.
And the speed and strength that he had was disproportionate to anybody else on the field at that particular time. And now you got people like, Aaron Donald and others.
Yeah.
They're just superhuman.
They are. And I think that all sports, we've become much more aware. I mean, I think back, I'm 50 years old, so I was in high school in the mid to late 80s, and I think back on, man, we didn't drink water out of fear we were going to have cramps, right?
Right.
I mean, that's crazy now.
Right.
And so we've advanced the sport and medical services dramatically in that time that I see it as being far more safe than it was even when I played. And I do think that the rules, we have a tendency to swing way one way and then we swing back the other way, and be nice to kind of hit things in the middle. But I do think that there are rule changes that I think targeting and better understanding of injuries. The tough thing about concussions is you break your arm, you know you've broken it. And when it's healed, you take a picture and you know it's healed. And there's so many, as I talk to our trainers, there's so many underlying things that relate to concussions. I've had multiple concussions in my life. One came from football, others came from skiing or banging my head on a limb of a tree when I was mowing a lawn, to falling off a clothesline pole when I was 10, all those different things.
Right.
But it's so hard to gauge and understand concussions. And I love what our trainer, J.C. White, tells our student athletes. He says, look, concussions are not the boogeyman. Don't be scared of them. You've just got to manage them like you'd manage any other injury, and you've got to talk about it. You've got to treat it, and your brain will heal. You've just got to treat it like an injury.
But you raised the point. It is a violent sport. I'll never forget an article in the New Yorker by Tiki Barber, who
my gosh,
who quit
I remember
in his
this.
prime.
Yeah,
he was the all-time season rushing leader for the New York Giants and retired at 33. And he said in the article, they asked him about how violent the sport was. He said every time he was tackled during his career, he felt like he was falling off a ladder backwards and hitting the ground.
Yeah.
And it's
great image.
Saquon Barkley. You could. There's just so much you can do. He can leg lift 725 pounds.
Yeah.
But he's going to be running down the field, and
someone's going to clip him.
Pound guy is going to just
fall on him.
Yeah.
I know. It's frightening to think about. But technology is to your point. Yeah. The improvements in technology has allowed people to do things that they couldn't do before. But to your point, also detect things that may have been dormant in an athlete. And, I
just always wondered whether there are, with all the lightweight materials, whether you really could craft, not quite like the Iron Man, but you could craft a equipment and padding and helmets that really could protect you from.
Well, there's part of me that says maybe we take the helmets off of them, and it might
make it better.
Cut down on concussions, because sometimes you feel a little invincible with all those things on you.
Yeah, good point.
Well, like rugby players don't have any of that stuff.
But we, sports, we as humans have always been drawn to the sport and the competition, and
the gladiator fights
and the violence. I hate to say it, but it's the violence. People like that.
Yeah, and it's a sport that and speaking of football, I enjoy it. But I'll tell you what, we have our fair share of concussions in soccer and in basketball and softball, and we have injuries in all of those sports. And I certainly don't want to just sit around and live in a bubble each day. There's some things you go out and do.
People choose. It's not mandatory, right? No. You're not mandatory on the football field or in a soccer team. You choose to do it.
If you watch an NBA game these days, you see how much is going on, how much contact there is.
Well, would you want to take a charge against LeBron?
No, but he's got Kevin. But and that's the thing. When we were growing up watching basketball, nobody had all these adornments, the Kevlar and the wraps and the compression. I mean, they're literally as suited up as a football player is.
Yeah.
It's just compression.
Well, they're bigger and faster. I mean, there's been a huge change.
Right.
I mean, you mentioned you're 50 years old. The linemen that you had in college back in those days would not even be safety size.
Yeah, they weren't pushing 300 pounds.
No. I mean,
and they weren't running 4.840s.
No, these
4.540s at 300 pounds.
The strengthening and conditioning at younger and younger ages. I mean, I notice it when you watch college basketball. You'll see a freshman or a sophomore on a team, and he's all muscled up. I mean, he looks like he's 20 years old.
Yeah, the understanding of the physiology and the training and how advanced we've become. But I still will always say that there is a role in higher education for athletics. I believe that the system we have in the United States is unique. Are there times when maybe it's too much of a focus? Yeah, I would agree with that. But I still think there are things that are taught, traits that are learned on that sporting experience that cannot be taught in any other way.
Well, one of the things that's a little different, and I don't think we'll ever get to that point, but for example, in international basketball or soccer, there are teams that are geographic. They're not aligned with a college. Or a school. So you're Barcelona or and they get paid even if they're 17, 16. There was a basketball player They were talking about it on the next game the other night. It was 16 years old, was making $250,000 a year playing basketball. And moving it away from being you go to school, but then you be on the team for the Montana team.
Yeah.
But I don't think that doesn't work here. But that would solve some of the problems that we see with paying and agents and all that sort of thing.
Right.
We as humans, though, we like to draw to our common belief, common connection,
right.
and our loyalty to an institution or to a city or something like that. So I would hope that it always stays connected into the college experience. And speaking from an intercollegiate athletic experience, stays connected to a university.
Right.
There are students that are there representing their fellow students and the institution, and then graduate from that institution.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I had a lot of international students when I was teaching at the business school, and they would come here and they couldn't understand. Like, they never had, yay, University Heidelberg, go.
Yeah,
They didn't have
yeah.
a team.
No,
they come here and everybody's tied up, wearing maroon and silver on a Saturday afternoon.
They were learning something new.
Yeah.
Good, interesting question I was going to ask you about community, because you are part of a great community, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, as the AD, like, what are the things that you need to do to reach out to the community and keep those lines of communication open? Whether it's the GSA or the something that's happening in town. I sit on the board of Destination Missoula, and I think about how the university is an incredible attraction from a tourism standpoint. You have alumni coming back every weekend.
Well, every time a Grizz game, it means
millions
of dollars. So how are you involved beyond the university?
Well, you have to consciously make sure that you cross over the river and get beyond Arthur Street,
right? Exactly.
And out into the community. And I think one thing that's really helped me do that, you went back to referencing my children, and that naturally connects you back into the community. And then also, and this is easier said than done, never taking for granted what people do and what people sacrifice to support you. There's times when you can easily kind of start to take for granted, or you get a little bit cynical when you're reading your 15th email about some complaint they've got. But I've always got to remind myself, step back and make sure that you always remember that people are connecting back to you. And I think it's being active in the community. One of our real focuses when I became the athletic director was we're gonna succeed in the classroom, we're gonna succeed in competition, and we're gonna succeed in the community.
Yeah.
So community service for our student athletes is one of our core measurable things that we do.
Sure.
And so forcing, I hate to use the word forcing because that makes it sound like you're dragging them kicking and screaming, but pushing them out and saying you need to go spend time. Coaches, our student athletes, our coaches, our administrators.
Sure.
You need to cross over. Arnie, you worked on that campus, so there's times when you can feel like the world ends at the river and at Arthur Street. Mm-hmm. And if you're not careful, you've got to get beyond that. You just
I could see that too.
Sure.
Our guest is Kent Haslam. He's the athletic director of the University of Montana. We will be back after this with our final moments. All righty, we were back.
So, Kent, what's coming up that our listeners ought to be paying attention to over the next month or so in the athletic?
Well, this is one of our busiest times because you got a lot of sports rolling right now. Basketball gets started here now in early November. Both our women and our men should have a great season. Always fun to watch them play. And then we've got the big Grizz Cat football game coming. We've got a few games between that, but November 17th, our friends from the East will venture over for that football game. And every time we host it in Missoula, the Friday night before, we have our big Grizz auction that's run by our Grizzly Scholarship Association. Really a great event and a great fundraising event. We rely on the public to generate a lot of revenue for us, and we realize that we do that, and this community is remarkable. But that Grizz auction, call our athletics off. Go to gogrizz.com. There's plenty of information.
Yeah, gogrizz.com is a great website.
It is.
And there's no pressure, of course, having the Bobcats come here.
No.
There's no competition. There's nobody paying attention.
I learned very early that's quite a rivalry.
It's unmatched, really.
It's
people
fun.
can talk about Ohio State, Michigan, whatever, but there's as strong a feeling between Grizz and Bobcat.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Being a transplant here, like you can be an observer.
Football, it's unlikely when you think about it from a U.S. context, but football really plays a big part in the Montana fabric of life.
It does, and we're a rural state, and this is what we've got. And I joke that Montana is really one big city with a really long roads when you really get across the state.
And this is the competition forever.
And I'll tell you what, Arnie, it permeates not just to football. Our tennis team likes to beat them too, and our golf team likes to beat them, and volleyball as well. So it's a good rivalry. It's a good, healthy rivalry on both sides.
Hey, Scott, you know what a typical Bobcat gets on his SAT test?
Tell me what.
Drool. That was one of the first jokes somebody ever said to me when I came to Montana.
Yeah.
When I ran the Montana World Trade Center, there were companies in Montana that were east of the divide that wouldn't work with me because I was on the UM campus and they were Montana State. Wouldn't take our advice, wouldn't work with us until we were, a Bobcat.
Sometimes it's a little petty, but
yeah. But it's a great rivalry. It is a great rivalry.
Your counterpart in Bozeman, do you guys talk before?
We do, yeah. Leon Costello he's a great administrator, great athletic director, and we joke. We typically find ourselves on the same side of arguments all the time when it comes to battling for things in the conference. Is that right? Oh, you bet. Because we're unlike any other. Us in Montana State are unlike any other school in our conference, where we really are driving the agenda of the state.
Sure.
Very different than when I was at Northern Arizona, and you kind of could sit back and let Arizona State and Arizona plow the road, and you just kind of came behind them.
Right.
Here, we do the plowing.
Right. One important thing I want to mention. We have something that many other people covet, and that's very unusual for a school our size. I wanted you to talk just briefly about the Champion Center.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful facility. That was something that's been a goal. Started working on that soon after I became the athletic director, and so grateful for the Washington family, their generosity, Kevin and Kyle, and then the hundreds of other people that have contributed. Beautiful facility that really is contributing to helping us recruit, and it's just a safe place for our student athletes to train and to work out and to get better.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
It's you go to many big schools out there.
They don't have that.
Don't have what we have.
No, it's very nice, and it contributes to the overall success. Our student athletes spend about 10% of their time out in those stadiums where we watch them.
Sure.
The other 90% of the time is spent in locker rooms and weight rooms and academic centers, sitting in classrooms, studying film.
Yeah.
We see the very small part of what they do when they compete.
Yeah. Ken, you've been a great guest. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. Would you come on, update us every year? Let us know what's going on.
Put it on your calendar. Once a year, we'll come in here and we'll talk about.
Unless you got something that you want to, you have a lead or something, or breaking news, you can always come on.
Okay. No, it's a pleasure. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit, and I love what I do. I love Missoula, and I love the University of Montana. Thank you, Grizz. Thanks for the support you provide us.
Go Grizz.
You got it. It shows. All right, Arnie, I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to What Do You Know?
I can't wait for the next show, Scott.
I'm excited too, Arnie. If you'd like to suggest a guest, send me an email at scottrichmond@townsquaremedia.com. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening to Newstalk KGVO,